are. But that's a simple illustration of XSS me. Let me close that down, go back to my page, and I'm going to reset my database once again. All right, I have a login form here, and the simple way to start testing for, or one way to test for SQL injection, is to use a simple single quotation mark or an apostrophe. Now, how many people here are of Irish heritage? Anybody? Cool. Anybody have like a name like O'Reilly, something with an apostrophe in it? These people sometimes had hell, and the first time I ever found out about this kind of injection flaw was because I wrote an app that allowed people to quickly choose what restaurant they want to go that day. Well, someone called me up or emailed me and said, I can't add O'Charlie's for some reason. Well, the reason was it had an apostrophe in it, and I wasn't filtering my strings properly. If I put an apostrophe, essentially what it's going to do is it's going to close those statements I mentioned before. And there we go. You see it gave me a syntax error. The reason it gave me a syntax error is because it sees the single quote mark, then another single quote mark, and it doesn't know what's going on. One of the later OWASP vulnerabilities I mentioned was improper error handling. Well, that's this, because I shouldn't be giving that much information to the end user of the application. And another one you see is I'm revealing way too much information about the internal representation of my database. Like, for instance, now you know I have a table named accounts. You know the exact SQL statement I'm using, and now that you know the exact SQL statement I'm using, it allows you to much more easily look at it and figure out, okay, how can I exploit this to my benefit? That's the next step. Yay. All right, I'm going to put in any old name. I'm going to use Adrian for this case, and I'm going to do a different injection this time. What I'm going to inject is that 1 equals 1. This is pretty much the classic SQL injection. There's a lot more things you can do. For instance, if you had a different database backend than the one I've got, you could possibly use this injection. Does anybody know what drop table does? There's a great, I think it's XKDC comic strip where someone basically named the kid with that particular line so that whenever the student enrollment happened at his elementary school, it ended up dropping the database. I thought about changing my legal name to something like that, but I figured that'd be awfully hard to get a job thereafter. But but unfortunately, I'm using PHP and MySQL, and at least on the implementation I have here, it won't allow me to do stacked queries like that. So I got to do something a little less interesting. I'm going to inject single quote, which closes out the previous quote at the end of the password field, or 1 equals 1, which is always going to be true, dash dash. The dash dash is a comment. Essentially, it says ignore the rest of it. It's meant for commenting code, but I'm going to use it to make it ignore the rest of the code so I don't get a syntax error. And one thing you may not see there, but there's actually one space after the dash dash. You do need to enter that, otherwise things just don't work properly. And let me close down Tampa Data. Now, I copied that, since it's too hard to just type it in, but that's what I'm about to enter. And notice I tried to log in as Adrian, but it logged me in as admin. The reason that is what it does is it iterates through the table, and eventually it finds a place where things return true. Well, something or something, something and something or 1 equals 1 is always going to return true. So the very first record it finds, it returned true. Generally speaking, if you have a table full of user accounts, what's the very first one? Usually admin. So that's why it logged me in as admin. But let's say I actually wanted to log in as Adrian. Sometimes admin's just not what you want. So I'm going to log back out, and I'm going to go log in, and it's a different string. Let's say I want to log in as Adrian. Well, you saw that string before. Let me go ahead and submit it again. Since I have the actual SQL statement that's being used, I can look at it and go, how can I modify this part so that it returns true with username equal to Adrian? But I don't want anybody else. So how do I make it not stop at the first record? Well, here's one answer. Single quote to close out the password, plus password, dash dash. And essentially what this does is, it looks silly, because essentially what I'm doing is concatenating a blank string and password. So it's saying, if the password equals password, return true. So the first part, Adrian and this both have to be true for it to return the result. A little complicated. If I drew them out side by side, you might get a better idea. I'm just going to go ahead and inject this, and hopefully it will log me in as Adrian. Really, you have to either play with it a lot or know what the SQL statement is to be able to do this properly. And you see, I'm logged in as Adrian. That's one of the reasons why you don't want to give bad error messages out to users, because it gives them so much more information about your database. And some people might say it's security for obscurity to hide all that. You don't want to rely on security for obscurity, but if you can take it, take it. All right, let me go back to my presentation. Now, that was a few simple SQL injections. Let's go with something a little cooler. Command injections, or can be cooler. Now, the way this is supposed to work is when someone goes down to this particular tool, DNS lookup info, I'm not attached to any network, so this is probably not going to work. Let me see if there's a network in the area. All right, that's not connect to a network. Anybody in the area? This may or may not work. I'll let it go in the background. If it doesn't work, that's okay too. It doesn't look like it's going to. They're probably using MAC address filtering. Oh, well, connected. Cool. Let's see if this craps out of me. The way this application is supposed to work is I'm supposed to just enter irongeek.com or some other domain name, and it returns the information on it. For instance, it returns what the IP address that particular host name resolves to. Well, that's what it's supposed to do. But let's say I modified it. Now, I'm running on a Windows box, so the separator I have to use, on Linux I'd use, I believe if I'm not mistaken, a semicolon. On Windows, I can use an and to tack on something extra. So that's not what I want. Also, what shell? Yeah, you can use Bash and sh, though, and work on Bash and sh. The old shells use the colon and newer shells use the and. Okay. I did not know that. Cool beans. Basically, what he's saying is those different characters. I'm using and in this, and sometimes this will work on a Linux box as well. When I was doing my testing before, I ended up using semicolons, but I'm not sure what shell I was using in the background. Okay. Well, I'm going to tack on a different command there. As I said before, in the back end, what this is actually doing is it's executing a command at the shell, ns lookup, and returning the results. Let's say I did something like directory and tagged that on the end. Well, now I have a listing of all the files in that directory. That might reveal some internal structure of the application, but there's much cooler things you could do. Depending on what account this web server is running as, possibly I could add users, though generally people are not going to have web servers running with that level of privileges. At least you hope not. So let's look at a few other things we can inject. Since I'm on a Windows box, all these injections are going to be solely for Windows. And I'm going to go ahead and just omit the host name. Basically, ns lookup might give me an error, but it's still going to return results for the actual command I'm injecting. WMIC process list. This simple WMIC command lists all the different processes that are running. Depending on what a process is named, I can find out other stuff that's running on that box and possibly other web vulnerabilities. Other vulnerabilities in general. Like I know they're running VMware. Or if I know what antivirus they're using, because I see it in the list, that gives me more information. Instead of that, let's find out, well, we want to brute force accounts, so we got to have a list of account names. Well, WMIC to the rescue once again. There's actually a guy named Mick on the PolitCon podcast who does a lot of stuff with WMIC, and I think they've covered that a couple times in recent episodes. All right. There I have a listing, and it scrolls way over to the right, of different accounts that are on my box. And you also have the ID. Yay, yay, great fun. Whether or not a password is required, if it expires, and you see there's an account named Adrian, there's an account named guest, and of course VMware user because I'm running VMware. Now let's get something a little bit more diabolical. Now this first string I have right here, I originally wrote this when I was doing everything in X